He was seen as a hero, confident, and an authority figure, but his outward gloss hid austerity, abuse of power, and hidden grievances that had been silenced for years. One evening, he stops a woman, U.S. Army Lieutenant Emily Sanders, in civilian clothes, who was returning from a volunteer mission. He tries to intimidate her and drags the case to court, convinced that she is just a regular woman. But in court, everything changes. In the quiet corridors of a small Pennsylvania town, where everybody knew everybody and reputation was an unspoken currency, Officer David Strong was a celebrated figure. Outfitted in a crisp, immaculate uniform and always seen with a confident, almost commanding smile, David had long been regarded as the local hero, a steadfast guardian of order whose very presence exuded authority. His badge was more than just metal and engraving. It was a symbol of power and respect, one that many in the community trusted implicitly. For decades, David had patrolled the streets with an air of invincibility. In his presence, citizens felt safer. His colleagues and local leaders praised him, and the media, when it did cover local law enforcement, painted him as the epitome of duty and honor. Every morning, as the fog lifted from the rugged country roads and the first rays of sunlight danced over the modest storefronts, David's polished patrol car would roll out in a display almost ceremonial. Neighbors would wave from their porches, proud that one of their own held such a revered position. At town meetings, his voice carried weight, a barometer of authority that, for most, left no room for criticism. To many, he was the standard by which all law enforcement should be judged. Yet beneath this veneer of civic pride lay a darker narrative, one that was whispered about in hushed tones behind closed doors. Those whispers spoke of an arrogance that went far beyond mere self-confidence. Behind his gleaming uniform, a hubris had taken root, a belief that he was above reproach. Over the years, subtle complaints had been filed and quickly suppressed by superiors who, whether out of loyalty or fear of tarnishing the town's shining image, preferred to sweep the matter under the rug. Colleagues would exchange knowing glances over case files, recalling instances when David's heavy-handed approach left a trail of quiet victims. In one incident, a young shopkeeper, clearly intimidated, had admitted in a hushed conversation that David's methods were more about asserting dominance than about genuine community service. But no one spoke out openly. The man was a hero in their eyes, and confronting him risked not only personal backlash but also challenging an ingrained local mythos. David's track record, reviewed on paper and in casual recollections, made him seem untouchable. Tales of excessive force were always met with defensive explanations. "I acted according to procedure," he would say with a dismissive shrug. His superiors, keen to maintain the town's pristine image of law and order, turned a blind eye to the undercurrents of abuse. The complaints, although numerous and sometimes detailed in unofficial memos, were always labeled as misunderstandings or isolated incidents. The robust support from local politicians and community leaders only further cemented his reputation. In debates on public safety, he was cited as an example of uncompromising commitment to the community. His name invoked as a byword for bravery, even as a few learned souls privately wondered if the price of such steadfast heroism was paid in cruelty. On a typical night, when the streets lay silent under a starry sky and the hum of neon flickered across empty sidewalks, David's patrol became less about protection and more an exercise in self-aggrandizement. He was known to stop vehicles for minor infractions that bordered on harassment and to use intimidation tactics that left innocent people shaken. Anyone who dared question his methods found themselves battling a wall of official bravado and bureaucratic red tape. In those moments, the officer's dark side, excess power wielded with little accountability, rose to the surface, hidden only by the carefully constructed image of the all-knowing, ever-reactive lawman. Yet, despite the undercurrents of abuse that marred his service record, David truly believed in his own righteousness. Every time he clocked in, he carried with him a sense of infallibility, a belief that his actions were always justified and that his interpretation of procedure was beyond contestation. That unwavering conviction was both his armor and his undoing, a shield that insulated him from criticism and a blind spot that allowed him to manipulate evidence and craft misleading narratives when circumstances did not favor him. He knew that in his small town, the system was built to protect the image of its heroes. And so, even when shadows of doubt loomed large, his arrogance and the conspiratorial silence of his peers ensured that his legacy remained untarnished, at least in the eyes of the public. For many residents, especially for those in positions of modest authority and vulnerability, David's actions were a mixed blessing. While his bold presence sometimes dissuaded criminal elements, they often left those caught in his wake with bruises, physical, emotional, and, at times, reputational. His unchecked power had a way of erasing nuance, turning every encounter into a display of force. Over the years, subtle patterns emerged. A string of drivers pulled over without cause, testimonies from community members who felt belittled by his curt orders, and an unspoken consensus that the officer's true motives were rarely about public service. In every instance, his mighty badge seemed to promise protection for himself rather than for those he was sworn to guard. In this small Pennsylvania town, where tradition mingled with communal values and loyalty was both currency and cage, Officer David Strong had built an empire of leadership and fear. Little did he know that the very force he so confidently wielded would one day be challenged by the unexpected, by someone who would refuse to be silenced by his authority. The stage was being set, quietly, inexorably, for a confrontation that would shake the foundation of this long-established hierarchy, revealing the true cost of unchecked power and the resilience of those who dared to fight for justice. While Officer David Strong maintained his polished image in a small Pennsylvania town, few knew about the quiet force that was Lieutenant Emily Sanders. In stark contrast to the brazen arrogance of those who thought they were untouchable, Emily embodied discipline, humility, and an unwavering commitment to justice, forged in the crucible of military service. Born into modest circumstances in a working-class suburb, Emily's early life was marked by a steadfast determination to serve others. Inspired by a deep sense of duty and driven by an intrinsic morality, she enlisted in the United States Army right after high school. Over the years, she rose steadily through the ranks, earning respect and accolades for her ability to maintain calm amid chaos and to lead by example, even in the hellish realities of combat. Throughout her distinguished military career, Emily distinguished herself not only through tactical brilliance, but also by the quiet compassion that she extended to every soldier under her command. In the heat of battle, when most succumbed to fear or bitterness, she became the calming presence whose steady voice reassured both comrades and civilians alike. Her numerous commendations, including a Bronze Star and a Commendation for Valor, were not merely symbols of heroism. They testified to a life dedicated to upholding the values of duty, integrity, and self-sacrifice. For Emily, service was never about accolades or recognition. It was about doing what was right, even when the cost was personal. Years of military service had refined her ability to scrutinize details with surgical precision, a skill that would later become crucial in her quest for truth. Her time on the front lines and later during peacekeeping and volunteer missions instilled in her a deep-seated understanding of the burdens borne by those in uniform, and those who opposed them when that power was abused. After returning from a particularly harrowing volunteer mission overseas, where she had helped rebuild communities devastated by conflict and natural disaster, Emily had chosen to don civilian clothing. This change of attire was not an abandonment of her identity as a warrior. Rather, it was a deliberate decision to blend into the tapestry of everyday life while continuing to serve society. In civilian garb, she was determined to press forward with the same commitment to justice, free from the trappings of uniform that often insulated and distorted the true nature of authority. Back in Pennsylvania, soon after her return from service, Emily found herself drawn into a routine that belied the extraordinary events she had experienced abroad. Priding herself on being level-headed and discreet, she continued her life in relative anonymity. However, her calm exterior concealed a mind that was vigorously attuned to matters of fairness. Her personal files, meticulously organized and backed by a lifetime of observational skills, were filled with records of encounters where she had witnessed the misuse of power. Perhaps it was these memories from distant battlefields, where the consequences of unchecked authority had proven disastrous, that had led her, over time, to amass a quiet dossier, a trove of documented interactions, recorded conversations, and eyewitness accounts, pertaining to incidents of excessive force committed by public officials in her own community. Known among her peers for her unyielding attention to detail, Emily never hesitated to double-check claims or rely on documentary evidence. This exacting nature had, on more than one occasion, earned her both admiration and quiet resentment among certain corridors of power. In her personal life, Emily was the epitome of calm efficiency. Her days were marked by early morning runs, rigorous training sessions, and methodical planning sessions with her fellow veterans who shared her concern for integrity within the ranks of authority. At social gatherings, while many flaunted bravado and rhetoric, she maintained a soft-spoken resolve, letting her actions speak for her. Her reputation grew not from flamboyant displays of courage, but from an enduring commitment to truth and a moral compass that always pointed true north. Now, on the eve of an encounter that would soon upend the status quo, Emily was returning from a volunteer assignment. Her assignment had been designed to help rebuild a remote village devastated by natural disaster, a testing ground of resilience and mutual aid where military precision met humanitarian grace. The mission had taken her deep into regions where corruption, neglect, and bureaucratic indifference were everyday realities. The experience had further honed her resolve to not let injustice fester, regardless of whether it was perpetrated on far-off battlefields or right at home. In her mind, every action taken to preserve dignity was critical, and every face that suffered under misuse of power needed representation. Even as she traveled back in her nondescript civilian vehicle along quiet state roads, Emily was far from complacent. She reviewed the digital logs of her service on a secure tablet, a habit born of meticulous record-keeping. Each incident, each conversation from her past postings, reminded her of the balance that must be maintained between authority and accountability. Life had taught her that those who wield power without consequence often believe themselves to be invincible, not realizing that every silver badge or every act of valor carries with it the potential for unchecked arrogance. In her heart, Emily had resolved that she would not tolerate such abuse in any form. Her personal history, a mosaic of combat experiences, leadership during disaster relief, and compassionate service, had sculpted a persona that was fiercely principled. While others might choose silence in the face of injustice, Emily had learned that some truths must be spoken aloud, especially when confronting those who hide behind a facade of righteousness. She had built a network among the veterans, community leaders, and even some within law enforcement who were quietly questioning the narratives that had been handed down through generations. In this shadowy interplay of light and dark that defined the line between organized authority and abusive power, Emily was fast becoming a beacon of resistance, a quiet warrior ready to deploy the weight of documented truth against any who dared to misuse their power. Unbeknownst to Officer David Strong, whose arrogance had blinded him to the consequences of his actions, Emily Sanders was preparing for a future confrontation, a decisive moment when her carefully gathered evidence and unwavering resolve would come to bear. Her story, etched in the scars of disciplined service and sacrificial duty, was about to intersect with his, setting the stage for a clash where the measures of true courage and accountability would be settled not behind closed doors, but in the open light of a courtroom. And in that arena, every record, every testimony, and every act of valor would stand as irrefutable proof that truth was ultimately the strongest weapon in the ongoing battle for justice. It was a chilly autumn evening when Lieutenant Emily Sanders was driving home on a quiet rural road in Pennsylvania. The sky was a deep, inked canvas pierced with a scattering of stars, and the only company on the road was the gentle hum of her car's engine. Still clad in civilian clothes after completing her volunteer mission overseas, Emily felt the comfortable weight of solitude, and perhaps even a fleeting sense of freedom, after so many long months stationed far from home. Little did she know that this unassuming drive would soon become a battleground for a man whose unchecked authority had long been shielded by small-town adoration. At nearly the same time, Officer David Strong was patrolling these remote stretches of road in his familiar patrol car. Known around town as the unblemished guardian of peace, he carried with him a swagger and self-assuredness that bordered on arrogance. For David, every routine traffic stop was less about ensuring public safety and more about asserting the dominance of his badge. Under his stern gaze, nothing was ever questioned, and any minor transgression, real or imagined, was instantly magnified. As he cruised the dark, winding road lined with skeletal trees, his trained eyes caught sight of a vehicle that he deemed irregular. In his mind, any deviation from the norm was an opportunity to prove, once again, that he alone could enforce order in a world that often turned a blind eye to the truth. Without a moment's hesitation, David activated his flashing red and blue lights. The piercing sound of the siren sliced through the quiet night. Emily's car, rendered momentarily startled, slid to the side of the road. Her heartbeat quickened as she pulled safely over. Though she had experienced roadside stops before, something about this encounter felt different. An inexplicable tension hung in the crisp air. As her car rolled to a stop, Officer Strong approached with a purposeful stride, his uniform pristine in the gleam of his patrol car's dashboard light. With his hand resting authoritatively on his holstered radio, he fixed Emily with a steely glare that belied both confidence and a tinge of disdain. "Good evening," he barked in a tone that brooked no argument. "License, registration, and proof of insurance now." His voice was harsh and clipped, an overt display of domination from a man who long believed that his reputation as a hero granted him license to act above reproach. Emily, accustomed to discipline and trained to remain composed in even the most stressful situations, retrieved her documents with a calm efficiency that contrasted starkly with the officer's aggressive demeanor. "Certainly, officer," she replied, her tone respectful but measured. She slid her driver's license and vehicle paperwork across the small, plastic partition of the car window, her eyes meeting his for just a brief, searching moment before she looked away, as if to shield herself from something she couldn't quite name. Officer Strong's eyes briefly scanned her documents, then returned to her face. "Where have you been this evening, Lieutenant?" he asked, though the title slipped unbidden from his tongue as if he recognized something in her manner yet chose to ignore it. In his mind, he had already decided her fate. She was, after all, just a civilian on a routine drive, nothing more, nothing less. But the irony of that thought was lost on him. Convinced that he was acting by the letter of some self-appointed procedure, he began to issue a series of rapid-fire questions, each one designed to unsettle her with insinuations rather than facts. "Your vehicle seems to be driving a bit erratically," he sneered, his voice rising slightly. "I have reason to believe you were speeding or perhaps distracted. Care to explain?" His tone dripped with condescension, as if her mere presence on the road was an affront to his authority. Emily maintained her composure, replying courteously yet curtly, "I was returning from a volunteer mission, officer. I'm well aware of the rules, more than enough to drive safely on these roads." Her measured response, laced with a subtle professionalism born of military training, only seemed to irk him further. As minutes passed with tension mounting in the close confines of the car, Officer Strong's behavior escalated. He began making derogatory comments, each one sharper and more personal than the last. "You think you're special because you've served your country?" he spat, his eyes narrowing in a mix of scorn and self-satisfaction. "This isn't some war zone. This is real life, where common sense prevails, and the law is absolute. You're not above it simply because of your medals." His words, designed to belittle and discredit her experience as a decorated military officer, revealed the dark underbelly of his unchecked arrogance. In his mind, authority was absolute and deviations from the norm, no matter who they came from, were to be met with forceful correction. In the space of one stifling, oppressive minute, Officer Strong decided to escalate the situation further. With deliberate cruelty, he fabricated a scenario that he claimed justified further detention. "Given your behavior and my concerns, I'm placing you under detention for further questioning," he announced. The statement was made with the calm certainty of a man who had long operated without fear of consequence. In his mind, he was safeguarding the community and proving his own invulnerability. Emily's heart sank at the injustice of it all, but her military training and deep-seated sense of duty allowed her to remain composed. She silently recorded the unfolding conversation on her handheld digital recorder, a precaution born of a lifetime of witnessing authority misused. Every word, every dismissive sneer was captured, an indelible record that she knew would someday serve as evidence against such abuse. As the conversation reached its apex, the officer, still puffed up with misplaced confidence, declared, "This is a simple matter. I acted strictly according to procedure." His final words echoed in the confined space of the car, leaving behind an aftertaste of absolute entitlement. Unbeknownst to him, in that quiet, defiant moment, Lieutenant Emily Sanders was already preparing for a confrontation far larger than himself. A legal battle that would not only unmask his arrogance but dismantle the very system that had shielded him for so long. In that small, ill-lit corner of Pennsylvania, on a quiet road under a star-studded sky, the seeds of accountability were sown. Emily's resolve, quiet yet unyielding, stood as a testament to the enduring power of truth. And as Officer David Strong turned back to his patrol car, unaware of the weight of evidence soon to be piled against him, the night bore witness to the beginning of a reckoning that would soon shatter his untouchable facade. After the unsettling roadside encounter, Lieutenant Emily Sanders returned to the quiet solitude of her car with a determined calm. As soon as the stern words and dismissive sneers of Officer David Strong faded into the night, she carefully replayed the conversation on her handheld digital recorder. Every remark, every nuance of his arrogant tone, was captured in crystal-clear detail. In the dim glow of her dashboard, Emily opened her secure notes app and, with calm precision forged by years of military discipline, began documenting the incident word for word. She detailed the officer's aggressive posture, his condescending comments about her service, and, most damning of all, his final assertion that he had acted strictly according to procedure. There was no outburst in her car. There was only the measured silence of someone who knew that the truth was her most potent weapon. With the recorded audio safely backed up and her notes meticulously organized, Emily recognized that she possessed a treasure trove of indisputable evidence that would later serve as the cornerstone of her legal challenge. Even as Officer Strong's self-assured laughter echoed in her memory, she felt no anger, only a resolute determination to ensure that unchecked authority did not go unchallenged. That very night, from the small confines of her vehicle parked under a canopy of whispering pines, Emily reached out to her trusted attorney. Captain Jack Miller, a battle-hardened veteran turned legal advocate, had earned a reputation for standing up to abuses of power. Their conversations had always been frank and purposeful. As the phone call connected, the familiar steady, compassionate tone on the other end reinforced her resolve. "Lieutenant Sanders, I've reviewed your preliminary notes," he said, his voice carrying both encouragement and a hint of grave determination. "What you've described and recorded provides a compelling thread to pull at. We'll build your case carefully." Within hours, Emily met with Miller in his modest law office in Harrisburg, a space lined with shelves of legal tomes and mementos from his own past military service. The office exuded a quiet dignity that balanced softened leather seats with the sharp aroma of freshly brewed coffee. From the outset, Miller's seasoned eyes scanned the digital evidence on her laptop. He listened intently as Emily recounted every detail of her encounter with Officer Strong, pausing periodically to ask clarifying questions. In that controlled environment, her voice remained steady and measured. Every word was a testament to her meticulous nature. The officer's baseless remarks, the unwarranted escalation in tone, and his final, self-serving declaration that he was merely following procedure. Over the course of their discussion, Miller began organizing a strategy. "We'll file a motion for official misconduct," he explained, tapping his pen against a notepad. "We'll compile every audio clip, every note, and if we can gather any corroborating witness testimony, we'll have a record that can't be dismissed easily." He understood, as did Emily, that local law enforcement in a small town was adept at protecting its cherished figures with a veneer of community respect. The challenge would be to compel the system to look beyond that facade and scrutinize the abuse of power that had become all too familiar in Officer Strong's actions. As the meeting progressed, they cross-referenced the timeline of events with Emily's personal log, which included not only her observational notes but also a series of GPS coordinates marking the location of the stop and the subsequent turnaround. Miller's experience in handling cases of police misconduct, honed on similar battles where the voice of the community had been stifled by institutional inertia, provided a blueprint for the legal onslaught they were about to launch. "We need to prepare for every counterargument," he stated calmly. He's likely to claim that his record is spotless, that he's a model officer acting within the bounds of prescribed procedures. But the irony is that procedures do not cover over abuse. They only mask it until someone like you brings it to light. They agreed to contact potential witnesses, bystanders who, even if reluctantly, might have seen parts of the stop, or who might have later expressed concerns to local authorities about similar incidents. Miller advised Emily on the importance of preserving the digital evidence, making multiple backups, ensuring the files were stored in encrypted formats, and even sharing a copy with a trusted third-party legal network known for its work in civil rights cases. Every step of the way, Emily's military training shone through. She handled the gathering of evidence with the same meticulous care one would approach a debriefing after a critical mission. There was no flash or grandstanding, only a disciplined resolve to document the truth and stand prepared to let that truth speak for itself in the face of unchecked power. By the time their meeting drew to a close, a detailed legal strategy had taken shape. The foundation was firm, a dossier of digital records, written notes, and the unwavering fact that Officer Strong's arrogant assertion of following procedure now hung in stark contrast with the evidence of his clear abuses. Emily left the office with a newfound clarity, her resolve steeled by the support of a veteran who had seen both the high stakes of battle and the quiet battles fought in courtrooms. She knew that every moment of silence, every measured word, and every precisely recorded detail would become an indelible statement in the pursuit of justice. In that quiet office, amidst the hum of an ordinary day, a battle was being waged beneath the surface, one that would soon pit the unchecked pride of a so-called hero against the unyielding truth of documented accountability. The stage was set for the verdict that would redefine the lines between authority and abuse, setting into motion a chain of events that could expose even the most deeply entrenched misconduct. The courtroom was a modest chamber in the county courthouse, a room filled with dark wooden benches, a stately judge's bench at the front, and a palpable tension that electrified the air. Today was the day when the long-practiced arrogance of Officer David Strong would be held accountable, and Lieutenant Emily Sanders was determined that every scrap of evidence she had painstakingly gathered would speak the truth. As the session was called to order, the judge, a seasoned and no-nonsense magistrate known for his commitment to fairness, sat sternly behind the bench. The gallery was filled with local residents, community activists, and a few curious reporters, all intrigued by the high-profile case that pitted a revered local officer against a decorated military veteran with unwavering resolve. The prosecution confidently introduced the case, summarizing the incident that had unfolded on that chilly autumn evening on a dark, winding road. They spoke not only of the routine traffic stop but of the blatant abuse of power Alan David Strong had exhibited that night. At the outset, Officer Strong took the stand. His posture was erect, his expression a mask of smug confidence, as if he were about to perform a well-rehearsed recitation of duty. In a booming, clearly rehearsed tone, he declared, "This is a simple matter. I acted strictly according to procedure." His statement was met with polite but skeptical murmurs from the gallery. To him, his reputation as the town's unwavering protector remained unassailable. He recounted the details of the stop with a rehearsed precision. A brief mention of erratic driving, a seemingly innocuous confrontation, and, ultimately, the need to detain a civilian element that he believed was causing undue disruption. However, before his testimony could be allowed to drift into self-aggrandizement, the prosecution introduced the first of several surprising witness testimonies. A young civilian, a local store owner who was known to have seen Officer Strong on several occasions acting with excessive zeal, took the stand. With shaky but determined resolve, the witness described how, on a similar night a few weeks earlier, he had observed the officer stopping a car without clear cause and berating a driver with condescending remarks. He was not here to protect or to serve, but to show off, the witness testified, his words trembling with the memory of intimidation. Although his memory was admittedly vague on specifics, his testimony sowed the seeds of doubt about Officer Strong's habitual practices. As additional witnesses came forward, each narrative wove a subtler yet undeniable pattern. Neighbors recalled instances of unjustified stops, and a local taxi driver mentioned that he had once overheard a conversation in which Officer Strong boasted that his badge made him untouchable. The mounting evidence from the testimonies painted a picture of personal vindictiveness stitched together with an unchecked abuse of authority, one that was long tolerated behind the shield of local adoration and political expediency. Despite this growing chorus of dissent, Officer Strong maintained his combative composure on the stand, insisting once more, "I did nothing more than enforce the law as written. I followed my training." His defense was built on the assumption that procedures, however inevitably manipulated, would eclipse sporadic grievances. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew steadily more charged, as if every spectator felt that here was a turning point, a moment when hidden truths would be revealed by the power of incontrovertible evidence. Then came the pivotal moment that would irreversibly change the course of the trial. As the prosecutor called for the introduction of new evidence, the judge's voice filled the room with solemn authority. "Lieutenant Sanders, are you ready?" At that precise moment, Emily, who had so far maintained a dignified silence both personally and in her testimony, met the judge's gaze with calm determination. With deliberate intent, she reached into her briefcase and produced a small, unassuming flash drive. Murmurs of anticipation and quiet curiosity rippled through the courtroom. Taking a deep breath, Emily addressed the court. "Your Honor, members of the court, I submit this flash drive as part of my evidence." The atmosphere became hushed, every eye fixed upon her, as she plugged the drive into a laptop connected to the courtroom's projection system. The screen, dark for a heartbeat, then flickered to life. What appeared on screen was nothing short of damning. The video footage, clear and unequivocal, showed the entire encounter on that cold night. A recording captured by a discreet personal camera Emily had activated as soon as she realized the stop was no ordinary traffic check. The grainy, yet unmistakable images revealed Officer Strong's aggressive approach. His initial demand for documents, his leering sneer, and the moment when he launched into a series of disparaging remarks. Even more incapacitating was the segment in which he fabricated allegations of erratic driving that never happened. The camera angle shifted deftly between views, capturing his voice in all its arrogance and the subtle evidence of his deviations from standard procedure. Every utterance, every dismissive gesture, was laid bare for the court to witness. As the footage played, the tension in the courtroom became palpable. The judge leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he took in the clearest validation yet of what Emily described. A murmur of realization spread among the jurors and the public gallery. The flash drive evidence did not merely support Emily's testimony. It dismantled the narrative of routine enforcement that Officer Strong had so arrogantly clung to. The recorded evidence, synchronized perfectly with the timeline established in Emily's logs, left little room for denial. During the projection, Emily's measured voice resonated once again, not to speak but to silently affirm to every present witness that truth had been meticulously documented. Each frame on the screen chipped away at the officer's defense. The video showed even the briefest moment when Officer Strong dismissed any inquiries by muttering, "I acted strictly according to procedure," a statement now rendered hollow by the unmistakable facts that preceded and followed it. Faces in the gallery shifted from skeptical curiosity to dawning shock. The tapestry of fabricated claims began to unravel in real time, and the once dominant persona of Officer Strong appeared diminished, vulnerable under the weight of undeniable proof. His attempts at self-righteous justification crumbled, and the courtroom's collective opinion began to align with the evidence presented by Emily. For a long, suspended moment, silence reigned as the last seconds of the video playback faded into static. Then, as if compelled by the raw power of what had been witnessed, the judge spoke with a tone that balanced authority and righteous indignation. Based on this evidence, it is clear that the defendant's actions were not only outside acceptable protocol but constitute an abuse of power. His words reverberated through the room, met by a quiet, determined nod among the members of the jury. In that charged moment, the evidence had spoken. The flash drive had unspooled an irrefutable narrative that contradicted Officer Strong's earlier denials and arrogant declarations. Emily's calm, measured resolve, honed by her service and fortified by unwavering truth, had turned the tide of the proceedings. The courtroom, once divided by conflicting testimonies, now bore the unmistakable clarity of justice emerging from meticulous documentation, a truth that could no longer be manipulated or dismissed. In the days following the explosive courtroom video evidence, the trial took on an even graver hue as additional material came to light, material that would further expose the extent of Officer David Strong's abuse of power. A private video, recorded by a concerned civilian using his dashcam at a nearby intersection on a different night, was introduced into evidence by Lieutenant Emily Sanders' legal team. This footage captured a similar incident in which Strong's demeanor was uncharacteristically brutal. His voice, dripping with condescension, berated a fellow motorist for an alleged minor infraction, his every word steeped in arrogance. The video, although recorded months ago, was irrefutable. In one moment, his aggressive gestures and dismissive body language betrayed a pattern. When the clip played in the courtroom, the room fell into a stunned silence as viewers saw a consistent thread of behavior, a pattern of intimidation that no official procedure could justify. But it was not only the visual evidence that unraveled the carefully maintained facade of invincibility around Officer Strong. In a subsequent session, a distinguished military veteran, one of Lieutenant Sanders' former colleagues from overseas deployments, took the stand to provide testimony. Sergeant Michael Mick Collins, known for his calm yet piercing manner, recounted an incident from a joint training exercise long ago, wherein Strong's approach to authority had verged on authoritarian. "I remember," he began, his voice resonant with conviction. "Officer Strong always insisted on absolute obedience. There were moments when he went far beyond what was necessary. I witnessed firsthand the way he dismissed valid concerns with a sneer and an air of entitlement." Sergeant Collins' testimony was bolstered by a series of documented military reports that, though never formally adjudicated in his unit, painted a disturbing picture of behavior cropping up again and again. His words resonated in the courtroom like echoes from a past that refused to die, a past where the abuse of power was met not with accountability, but with silence and indulgence. As the testimonies and supporting evidence mounted, the calm veneer of the courtroom shifted. Officer Strong, who had for so long projected the image of an untouchable lawman, began to show visible signs of strain. His once defiant gaze wavered. His responses, which earlier had been brisk and rehearsed, now came across as tentative and halting. During cross-examination, when confronted with the dashcam footage and detailed accounts from Sergeant Collins and other local witnesses, his confident posture faltered. For the first time, the officer's voice quivered ever so slightly as he tried to reconcile the conflicting narratives. I acted by the book," he stammered when pressed on the specifics. But the undeniable evidence, the personal recordings, the military testimonies, and the cumulative witness statements, formed a tapestry of misconduct that no amount of rehearsed justification could mend. The pivotal moment came when a well-respected member of the local police force, a veteran officer who had long harbored private concerns about the unchecked behavior of his colleague, was compelled to step forward. Under the weight of his own conscience and mounting pressure from within the force, he corroborated Lieutenant Sanders' account. "I've seen it with my own eyes," he testified, his voice low but resolute. "There were occasions when David's actions were beyond what any reasonable officer would consider acceptable. He thought his badge made him immune, but no badge can shield one from the truth when it's recorded for all to see." As the testimonies continued, the atmosphere grew increasingly charged. A palpable tension built upon the certainty that justice was imminent. In that charged space, the court's attention intensified as every piece of evidence, every corroborative statement, chipped away at the constructed myth of Officer Strong's invulnerability. The once-repeating refrain, "I acted strictly according to procedure," echoed hollowly, unable to drown out the chorus of voices and footage that painted a far grimmer picture. By the close of that day's proceedings, it was unmistakable. The record was unequivocal. The jury, now burdened with a mountain of irrefutable evidence, could no longer entertain the notion that David Strong's actions were anything other than an abuse of power designed to intimidate and silence. The cumulative effect of the private dashcam video, the forceful testimonies from military veterans, and the brave internal dissent from his own colleagues had taken its toll on the officer. In the solemn stillness of the courtroom, it was evident that the mighty facade of a local hero was crumbling under the relentless weight of documented truth. As the session adjourned, whispers spread through the gallery, whispers of accountability, of long-awaited justice finally catching up with a man who had so long believed that his authority was absolute. Outside, under the dim glow of streetlights, Officer Strong was seen sitting in silence beside his patrol car, head bowed and eyes shadowed by an unmistakable weariness. For the first time, the man known for his unassailable confidence appeared vulnerable, on the brink of an emotional collapse that signified the unraveling of a carefully maintained persona. In that moment, every soul in the courtroom, every member of the gallery, and even those who had quietly doubted him for years, realized that truth was a powerful antidote to unchecked power. The evidence from a single private camera, combined with the courage of military veterans and the quiet resolve of one determined lieutenant, had set in motion a reckoning that would change everything. The battle lines between authority and accountability had been redrawn, and the outcome was now inching close to a transformative verdict. The final day of the trial dawned gray and tense, as if the Pennsylvania skies themselves braced for a reckoning. The courtroom, already charged with an undercurrent of anticipation, now hummed with a palpable gravity that silenced even the usual low murmur of journalists and local residents. Every face in the gallery bore the weight of a collective expectation, a hope that someone, somewhere, would finally dare to hold unchecked power accountable. After days of relentless testimony, relentless evidence, and an accumulation of damning audiovisual records, the prosecution rested its case. Lieutenant Emily Sanders had laid bare the entire incident with a precision that left no room for dispute. Earlier that day, her flash drive had unleashed a torrent of irrefutable evidence. Grainy but unmistakable body camera footage, personal recordings that captured every condescending sneer and every violation of protocol, and eyewitness accounts from both civilians and military veterans. Each clip, neatly interlaced with her own detailed logs and corroborative statements from other officers, painted a portrait of a routine traffic stop that had spiraled into an abuse of power, an abuse that Officer David Strong had pilfered from his badge with impunity. Now, as the judge called for closing statements, the atmosphere in the courtroom reached a fevered pitch. The judge, an austere yet fair man with decades of legal experience, addressed both sides with careful precision. In every society, the rule of law is paramount, he began, his deep voice resonating off the paneled walls. No individual, regardless of his reputation or the esteem in which he is held, is above the law. Today, we have been presented with a case that challenges who we believe we are as a community. When duty is perverted into personal entitlement, when one acts in the shadows of corruption while hiding behind a gleaming badge, the very foundation of justice is threatened. Officer Strong, seated at the defense table with a posture that had once exuded unassailable confidence, now appeared diminished. His eyes, once steely and defiant, flitted nervously as the evidence was recounted for the final time. His earlier refrain, "I acted strictly according to procedure," had lost its echo in the face of mounting testimony and incontrovertible recordings. Every piece of evidence, from the crisp audio of his derogatory remarks to the visual record of his aggressive approach, now lay bare the stark reality of his misconduct. One by one, witnesses recounted their experiences. A local store owner, with trembling determination, reiterated how he had seen Officer Strong engage in unnecessary displays of force during a routine stop just weeks prior. A retired taxi driver testified that he had overheard the officer boasting about his untouchable status, an assertion that now rang pathetically hollow. Even a fellow officer, previously silent out of fear of reprisal, admitted under oath that he had witnessed actions that far exceeded any acceptable standard of conduct. Sergeant Collins, a military veteran who had served alongside Emily, recounted an incident from a joint exercise where Strong's insistence on absolute command bordered on tyranny. Each testimony further disintegrated the carefully maintained mask of authority that Officer Strong had worn for so long. Finally, the prosecution rested, and the defense was allowed a brief rebuttal. But their attempts to justify Strong's actions faltered in the presence of the formidable documentary trail amassed by Lieutenant Sanders, which had been meticulously authenticated by digital forensic experts. The defense's arguments, a series of tired assertions about procedure and training, were drowned out by the overwhelming clarity of the multimedia evidence. The courtroom, once a stage for conflicting narratives, had become a tribunal where truth reigned supreme. After what felt like an agonizing eternity of hushed silence, the jury filed back into the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on the foreman as he rose to deliver the verdict. The palpable tension reached its apex as he spoke in a steady, measured tone. On the charge of abuse of power and misconduct in office, we, the jury, find the defendant, Officer David Strong, guilty. A collective exhale swept through the room. Some in the gallery clapped softly. Others murmured in relief and vindication. The judge then pronounced a sentence that would reverberate far beyond this small town. A suspension from duty effective immediately, followed by a comprehensive internal investigation and referrals for criminal charges where warranted. In that moment, the walls of the courtroom seemed to vibrate with the force of accountability. The applause, initially tentative, swelled into a robust, coordinated ovation from community members and civil rights advocates alike. It was as if the collective heartbeat of a long-suffering community had finally been set right. The judge's final words resonated. Let this verdict stand as a testament that no badge, no matter how glorified, can shield one from the unwavering scrutiny of the law or the resolute demand for justice. As the proceedings concluded, Emily Sanders stood up slowly from her seat in the gallery. With a calm that belied the storm of events, she gathered her personal belongings, a folded notebook, copies of the digital logs, and the now iconic flash drive, and left the courtroom. Her expression was steady, a mingling of quiet triumph and remorse for a system that had once seemed impervious. In her eyes sparkled a determination tempered by discipline, the same determination that had carried her across hazardous battlefields and through moments of quiet rebellion in her civilian life. Outside the courthouse, the day was brightening, and a soft breeze stirred through the gathered crowd. Neighbors, supporters, and even a few former skeptics converged around Emily. Their expressions spoke of a shared hope that justice was finally restoring balance. Journalists scrambled to record the historic moment, while local social media erupted with hashtags celebrating accountability and transparency. For many, the verdict marked the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where the community could begin to heal from the scars of unchecked authority and abuse. In the midst of the celebration, quietly, Emily paused and looked toward the courthouse steps, her gaze steady and reflective. She recalled the cold, dismissive tone of Officer Strong as he had declared, "This is a simple case. I acted strictly according to procedure." And then she remembered the pivotal moment when the judge had asked, "Lieutenant Sanders, are you ready?" And how, with unwavering calm, she had produced that flash drive to reveal the undeniable truth. Today's vindication was not just about one officer's misconduct. It was about affirming that truth and integrity, when bolstered by relentless effort and unyielding resolve, would always rise above attempts to silence them. Officer David Strong, once a man who believed that his badge would forever grant him impunity, had seen his defenses crumble under the weight of hard evidence and the courage of those who refused to let injustice remain unchallenged. His once impenetrable reputation was left in tatters, a reminder to all that no one is above accountability. He thought that the system would always cover him as it had in the past. But he did not count on facing a woman who knew how to fight for the truth. Subscribe if you believe that truth is mightier than a badge.